The phone rang at 11:47 p.m., and I already knew before I picked it up that something in my life was about to end. "Mr. Doyle, this is Sergeant Alvarez, Fresno PD. We need you to come down to the station. It's about your daughter's shop." I was 63 years old, sitting alone in a kitchen that still smelled like the pot roast my late wife used to make, and I felt my chest go tight in a way it hadn't since her funeral. My daughter Renee ran a small custom key and security business 2 towns over, a business I'd helped her start with the last of my retirement savings 4 years earlier. "Is she hurt?" I asked. "No, sir, she's not hurt, but there's been an incident, and your name is on some of the paperwork we found." I hung up the phone, put on my coat, and drove through the dark, not knowing that by the time I reached that station, I would learn my own son-in-law had spent 3 years quietly bleeding my daughter's business dry, and forging my signature to do it. My name is Walter Doyle. I'm a retired locksmith, 63 years old, 38 years in the trade before I sold my shop and helped Renee open her own. I know locks, I know how things are built to keep people out. I did not know, until that night, that the person who'd break into my life wouldn't need a lockpick at all. He'd just need a signature that looked close enough to mine. Renee married Dominic Fenwick when she was 26. He was charming in that easy, unbothered way, the kind of man who remembered your birthday and complimented your cooking and never seemed to want anything from anyone. I liked him. God help me, I liked him. When Renee wanted to open Doyle and Fenwick Security Solutions, I liquidated my 401k, $84,000, without blinking, because that's what fathers do. Dominic didn't have capital, but he had connections, he said. Vendor relationships. A cousin in commercial real estate who got them a good lease. I signed as a co-guarantor on the business loan because Renee asked me to, and because I trusted the man she'd chosen. For 3 years, I watched them build something real. Renee handled the trade. She was better with a pick set than I ever was. Steady hands, patient mind. Dominic handled the books. I never once asked to see them. Why would I? He was family. I helped install their security systems myself, free of charge, working weekends well into my 60s, because that shop mattered to me more than my own retirement did. I told myself I was building something that would outlast me, a legacy with my name still on the door. I had no idea Dominic had been quietly opening a second set of business accounts using a signature stamp he'd had made, one that looked, at a glance, exactly like mine. The detective slid a folder across a metal table at 1 a.m. and asked me to confirm 4 signatures on equipment financing agreements, totaling $61,400. I looked at my own name, written in my own handwriting style, on documents I had never seen in my life. "That's not my signature," I said. "I don't sign my W's like that." Sergeant Alvarez nodded slowly, like she'd expected that answer. "Your daughter found something in the shop safe 2 days ago, a duplicate business bank card in your name. Account opened 18 months ago, statements mailed to a P.O. box in Clovis." Renee had discovered it by accident, reorganizing a filing cabinet for a tax audit, a single unlabeled folder. Inside it, a printed signature template, my social security number written on a sticky note, and bank statements showing withdrawals, small ones, careful ones, never enough to trigger a fraud alert. $600 here, $1,200 there, 18 months of it. I did not say a word that night beyond what the police needed. I signed the statement. I drove home. I sat in my truck in the driveway for 40 minutes before I went inside, because I needed my face to be a normal face by the time Renee saw it. She was on the porch when I pulled in, wrapped in a blanket, eyes red. "Dad, I didn't know. I swear to God I didn't know." "I believe you," I said, and I did. That was the part that scared me most. I didn't confront Dominic. Not that night, not the next week. I have built enough locks in my life to know that the moment you rattle the door, the person on the other side runs. So I did what a locksmith does before he ever touches a pick. I studied the mechanism. I asked Renee, calmly, to say nothing, to behave exactly as she always had. Dominic came home from his sales trip 3 days later, tan and easy and smiling, and I sat across from him at Sunday dinner and asked about his golf game. Inside, something had gone cold and precise. I started keeping a notebook, every account number Renee could pull, every statement date, every vendor who'd been paid twice for equipment that only arrived once. I photographed the folder from the shop safe before it went to the detective, just in case. And then Dominic, believing himself completely safe, handed me the last piece I needed without knowing it. At dinner, boasting about a new investment opportunity a friend had brought him, he mentioned casually that he'd need to move some funds from the reserve account, an account Renee had never heard of. He said the account number out loud, laughing, showing off, not realizing her father sat across the table with a memory trained by decades of matching serial numbers on customer key cuts. I wrote it down in the bathroom 2 minutes later, with my hands only slightly shaking. I called Marion Cho the next morning. She'd handled my wife's estate years ago, sharp, unhurried, the kind of attorney who never raised her voice because she never needed to. "Walter, if this is what you're describing," she said, reading through the notebook I'd brought her, "this isn't a family dispute. This is bank fraud and identity theft. Federal, potentially." We spent 3 weeks building it quietly. Marion pulled the loan applications through discovery-adjacent requests before any filing, matching handwriting inconsistencies against documents I'd genuinely signed over the years. Permits, tax forms, my old shop's business license. A forensic document examiner she trusted, a woman named Priya Ahluwalia, confirmed what I already knew: pressure patterns, formed letter shapes, practiced strokes. Someone had trained to copy my signature the way you'd train to copy a key, patiently, repeatedly, until the profile matched close enough to pass a glance. Renee, meanwhile, quietly began routing new client payments through a fresh account Dominic didn't know existed, one Marion helped her open under the business's original operating agreement. The one that, buried in fine print neither Dominic nor his cousin had ever bothered reading closely, still listed me as majority guarantor with authority to freeze shared accounts under specific loan default conditions. Dominic kept living exactly as he had, golf on Thursdays, boasting about the reserve account, utterly convinced that the quiet old locksmith at the head of the table had nothing but a bad knee and a good casserole recipe. The first door closed on a Tuesday. Marion filed the loan guarantor freeze, using the original agreement's default clause, citing undisclosed secondary accounts as a breach. Dominic's reserve account locked without warning 3 hours before he tried to move the funds he'd bragged about at dinner. He called Renee in a panic. "Something's wrong with the account. Call the bank." Renee, coached and calm, said she'd look into it. She did not look into it. She called me instead. The second door closed 2 days later. Priya's forensic report went to Detective Alvarez, formally confirming the forged signatures matched a template found in the shop safe, the same safe Dominic had access to, and Renee did not routinely check. There was one moment that nearly unraveled everything. Dominic, sensing something was wrong, showed up at the shop unannounced on a Thursday afternoon, going through the filing cabinet himself, looking for the folder Renee had already turned over to police. He found it empty and stood very still in the back office for almost a full minute. Renee, watching through the security camera feed on her phone from the front counter, said later her heart didn't start again until he finally shrugged, muttered something about paperwork, and left. He never suspected the empty folder wasn't oversight. It was evidence, already in Marion's hands, and mine. The third door closed when the loan companies, notified of suspected fraud, began their own internal reviews that, per federal lending regulations, required immediate reporting to law enforcement once forgery was confirmed by a licensed examiner. Marion arranged the confrontation in her conference room, not our home. Neutral ground, recorded with consent under California's two-party notification law, everyone informed in advance that the meeting was legal in nature. Dominic arrived thinking it was about a loan restructuring, Renee's cover story. He wore his good watch. He smiled at me the way he always had. Marion laid the documents out one at a time, the forged signatures, the P.O. box, the duplicate account statements spanning 18 months. Priya's forensic comparison, side by side, undeniable. Dominic's face went through 3 stages: confusion, calculation, and finally, something smaller and uglier. "This is a misunderstanding," he said. "Renee knew about some of this. We were going to tell you when things stabilized." 18 months of statements mailed to a P.O. box under my name is not stabilizing, I said. My voice stayed level. I'd practiced that in the truck for weeks. He tried Renee next, the wounded husband voice, the after everything I've done for this family voice. She sat with her hands folded and said nothing, which said everything. "I want to talk about restitution," he tried finally, the negotiator surfacing once denial failed. Marion slid the police report across the table instead. That conversation happens with Detective Alvarez now. The Fresno County District Attorney charged Dominic with identity theft, forgery, and financial elder fraud, the elder fraud enhancement applying because the forged accounts were opened in my name while I was over 60. He faced up to 7 years. Renee filed for divorce the same week the charges were announced, citing financial fraud committed against a family member as grounds. The business survived, barely, restructured under Renee's sole ownership with Marion's help, the loan guarantor clause finally protecting the thing it was written to protect. Dominic's cousin, the one who'd arranged the original commercial lease, quietly distanced himself once his name surfaced in an unrelated vendor payment inquiry. Word moved through their small circle of mutual friends fast. Within a month, Dominic had lost his marriage, his business partnership, and most of the golf buddies who'd once laughed at his jokes about the clueless old man who funded the shop. He pleaded guilty rather than face trial. 3 years probation, restitution of $61,400 plus interest, and a felony record that would follow every background check for the rest of his life. It's been 2 years now. Renee runs Doyle Security Solutions. She dropped the second name from the sign herself, said it felt lighter without it. Business is steadier than it's ever been. I still come in on Saturdays, mostly to drink coffee and hand her tools she doesn't need handed to her anymore. I heard Dominic's living with his mother now, working retail 2 towns over, the kind of quiet obscurity men like him fear more than prison. I don't check on him. I don't need to. What I learned, at 65, restoring old locks in my garage on Sunday afternoons, is that trust is a mechanism like any other. It can be picked, if someone studies it long enough and patiently enough, but so can betrayal. It just takes someone willing to be quiet and careful, and to remember every number they hear at the dinner table. If someone in your life has ever used your trust as the one thing holding the door open for them, I hope you find your own quiet moment to close it. Thanks for listening. If this story meant something to you, subscribe for more, and tell me in the comments where you were listening from.